Now, even though it did not yield for us immediately the benefits, the fact that we have hung on to that particular method of resolving conflicts and are now on the verge of being able to produce the results of that is going to be a very, very strong message to the world that Hawaii has succeeded in restoring its nation and its integrity and its position in the world because they played by the rules and did so with grace and with aloha. You know, that's going to speak very, very loudly to the international community of how conflicts and how disputes can be approached, should be approached. And so we're expecting, as Hawaii succeeds in restoring our nation, that this will send a loud message of aloha to the world. Yeah. For most people who are visiting Hawaii, they don't realize that Hawaii actually is a kingdom. It's a kingdom remaining from the 19th century and continuing on. But there is an overlay, of course, of what is called the state of Hawaii, and that's what most people see and relate to. We're, as Hawaiian nationals, as sovereigns and citizens of the Hawaiian kingdom, we are actually looking to try to change that perception, not only recapture our nation, but to change the perception that people have about us. So we still are the Hawaiian kingdom, although it's being occupied or captured by the United States as a state of Hawaii. So most people who come here are not aware of that at all. So we're trying to make people aware. Yeah. Yes, I think that Hawaii is such an unusual situation in that when this adversity appeared on our doorstep, we handled it diplomatically. We handled it the way that the United Nations decided 60 years later how to handle things, that we ought to be doing it through negotiations, through international law and all that. Now, even though it did not yield for us immediately the benefits, the fact that we have hung on to that particular method of resolving conflicts and are now on the verge of being able to produce the results of that is going to be a very, very strong message to the world that Hawaii has succeeded in restoring its nation and its integrity and its position in the world because they played by the rules and did so with grace and with aloha. You know, that's going to speak very, very loudly to the international community of how conflicts and how disputes can be approached, should be approached. And so we're expecting, as Hawaii succeeds in restoring our nation, that this will send a loud message of aloha to the world. Yeah. the Hawaiian Kingdom was actually a functioning nation among nations, recognized by all of the other nations of the world as a sovereign state or nation state. And there were some people, disgruntled people within Hawaii called the sugar planters. They were also the wealthiest people and had amassed a great amount of wealth growing sugar and trading that sugar with the United States. So they really conspired to think that if they could annex Hawaii to the United States and make Hawaii a part of the United States, then that would improve their market position within the United States. And they were also able to find co-conspirators in the United States government, primarily in the military, saying that Hawaii could offer the United States a very excellent naval base called Pearl Harbor. And so the two powers conspired, and they cooked up this scheme that if there was an overthrow of the regime change in Hawaii, and those that overthrew the government were to offer it to the United States, that the United States would gladly annex the Hawaiian Islands. So that was the basic scheme, and that's what was pulled off. Now, none of this, of course, was legal because the United States had treaties with the Hawaiian Kingdom, treaties of friendship and of respect for our sovereignty and things like that. So this was definitely an illegal action on the part of the United States to participate in what is now called regime change, to change over the regime of another country for the purpose of taking over that country. So that is actually a criminal endeavor on the part of a nation taking over another nation. But nevertheless, they went ahead with the scheme. The scheme was exposed early on and was shown to be patently illegal. The first president of the United States who looked at the situation after the overthrow had taken place admitted that the United States had committed an act of violations of international law and possibly an act of war against a friendly nation. And so he recanted that and basically said that the United States cannot pursue annexation of a friendly nation without that nation's consent. So he actually made an agreement with Queen Liliuokalani, who had been deposed, but he made an agreement to restore her as the sovereign of the independent country of Hawaii. That agreement is actually in limbo right now. It has never been executed, although it was agreed upon. However, a few years later, when President Cleveland, who made that agreement, was out of office, then the conspirators within the United States who wanted to take over Hawaii pushed again for annexation. By now, there was a provisional government in place and what was called the Republic of Hawaii. There was a regime change in that they did create a new nation, or out of scratch, out of nowhere, and created this Republic of Hawaii. So the Republic of Hawaii entered into an agreement with the United States to annex the Republic of Hawaii to the United States. This was received by quite a few members of Congress. They were very receptive to it. They would have had to approve it. But the Hawaiian people themselves, of course, protested and filed a very strong protest where they took up a petition of Hawaiian nationals, those who are nationals of the Hawaiian Kingdom, and that over 90% of the Hawaiian nationals signed that petition resisting or opposing annexation to the United States. So when it finally got to the Congress of the United States, to the Senate, for ratification, it was turned down because they did not have the consent of the people of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And so Queen Liliuokalani, who had been in Washington lobbying against it, returned home quite victorious because we had defeated any treaty of annexation. Within a few months' time, the United States had provoked a war with Spain to try to oust Spanish influence from the Western Hemisphere. And so the war began against Spain, and it went very quickly. Most of it was fought in Manila and Puerto Rico, um, and yeah, Cuba, in Havana, and but the Manila part of it, which is in the Philippines, was the part that involved Hawaii. So the United States, in prosecuting their war with Spain in 1898, decided to go ahead and seize Hawaii to be used as a base. So they used a false, or the premise of what is called a joint resolution of Congress to quote, acquire Hawaii as a territory of the United States, under the excuse of military necessity, meaning they needed the military base here, so therefore they would simply acquire Hawaii to be that military base. After the Spanish-American War, which was fairly short, then Spain then yielded and signed over several of its territories to the United States, Hawaii not being one of them because Hawaii was an independent country. But the United States simply proceeded as if Hawaii were a part of the spoils of war, and basically treated Hawaii as a territory acquired during the Spanish-American War through their joint resolution. So none of this is lawful. And the people of Hawaii protested that quite strongly, but those protests were overlooked, and the nations that we had treaties with failed to come to our aid to stick up for the fact that Hawaii is still a sovereign nation. And so the United States simply subsumed the Hawaiian Kingdom as the Republic of Hawaii, and then into the United States as a territory of Hawaii. And then embarked on a very strong Americanization of Hawaii at that point. So several generations later, they succeeded in practically wiping out any memory of Hawaii having been an independent nation on par with all the other nations. The North American natives were also, of course, unlawfully displaced, or their lands were seized, and their people were incorporated into the United States. The difference is that Hawaii was actually a sovereign state with a treaty on the same level as an equal in sovereignty to the United States, as well as to Great Britain and France and others. So there is a difference there in its stature and its protection under international law. So the United States has always treated the problems with the nations, with American Indian nations, as a domestic problem. But that is what they are attempting to do now with the Hawaiian Kingdom, to treat this as a domestic problem. And so the thing that is most glaring is that when we began to find out about the anomalies about what happened in 1890s and the takeover of the Hawaiian Kingdom, we started to really discover this in the 1970s. And by the 1990s, we became quite aware of it, to the point where the United States actually issued an apology for the taking of our nation without our people's consent. And that apology was issued in 1993, signed by Congress and by the President of the United States. So it became clear at that point that the United States knew exactly what it had done. It also became clear that the United States was now beholden to doing something to rectify or to resolve the situation of this inequitable taking over of another nation. So the United States set out to try to resolve it by treating Hawaii as an Indian nation, saying these are the parameters within the United States law that we can deal with the Hawaiian people. And in so doing, they neglected or failed to acknowledge the fact that this was an international breach of a breach of international law, not a breach of domestic law. And so the United States has been, since 1993, attempting to fix the matter under domestic law. But the more they attempt to do it, the more apparent it becomes that there is a real problem, that they are using the wrong remedy for the wrong illness or ailment. The Hawaiian people have, over the years, because of these attempts by the United States, have become much more aware of the fact that there is a problem here, and that the United States is trying desperately to solve the problem using its own solutions, and neglecting or simply not paying attention to the real solution, which is the return of the nation to the people of that nation. Of course, many people consider Hawaii being a part of the United States as a blessing, that we have acquired, of course, much of the protection of the United States, the industry, and these types of things. Under regular circumstances, that would seem like a very good thing. The problem is that we have been disenfranchised from benefiting from the use of our lands and our country. And Hawaiians are right now, native Hawaiians, are on the bottom rung of all the social measurements that you have. So we're the most incarcerated people, we have most homeless, the most number in poverty, illnesses, and these types of things are all afflicting the Hawaiians. And much of it has to do with the separation of the Hawaiians from their land and from nature, from the natural sustenance that they gain from the land. And the land has been redeveloped many times over, and those that have profited from it are not the Hawaiians, but others. And so we're at the point now where we are not receiving any benefits of the lands and not having any say in the land use. In the recent years, there have been many confrontations over land use, be it the rail, disturbance of sacred sites, burial sites and things like that. This past year, Mauna Kea, the sacred mountain. All of these types of controversies point to the fact that the Hawaiians have not been consulted or considered in the decisions to utilize or to exploit these resources. We look at the buildings around us and the growth of Waikiki, downtown Honolulu, and all over, and we see that the Hawaiians did not benefit from that, nor did we participate or give any consent into this. So, yes, we benefit because we're part of this society, but we had no say in it, and we also are at the bottom part of the society as a result. Now, what is happening in a global sense is that after World War II, there was a coming together of nations called the United Nations, and they decided that there were two main objectives that the United Nations would tackle. The first was to seek peaceful resolution to any conflicts, to try to put an end to all wars, and that was their main thing. The second was to decolonize the world, to stop the exploitation of stronger nations over weaker nations, and really literally the enslavement of these nations under an administrative nation. So decolonization became a huge goal of the United Nations as well as the world community. And in greater part, they did succeed. Over the 70 years of the United Nations existence, a great part of the world has been decolonized. Hawaii was slated to be part of that decolonization effort. But in 1959, the United States schemed to make Hawaii appear as if we had chosen to become part of the United States, to be integrated within the United States. And so there was a manufactured plebiscite with a manufactured consent. And so there are many questions about that particular move, but the effect that it had was it made it appear as if the Hawaiians had exercised their right to self-determination and had determined that the future of Hawaii laid as a state of the United States. So it was a very diabolical scheme, but it worked on the part of the United States, again, until, of course, when you start to examine how the United States came to acquire Hawaii. So the apology that the United States issued really lined up with the real facts, is that the United States had no business claiming Hawaii was a territory of the United States, therefore had no business taking a vote in the Hawaiian Islands to join the United States. So the reason that we are looking toward, there's a number of different reasons. One is self-determination, to be able to determine for ourselves what we want to do with our own land, to be able to utilize that land to our benefit, as well as to the world's benefit, but to be able to be the ones who make that decision. The other part, of course, is the spiritual connection of the people to the lands, which is extremely important, not only to Hawaiians, but to people everywhere. So when the decolonization process went into place, much of that kind of spiritual reconnection of the peoples to the land occurred, and this is how we're able to function as the United Nations now has 193 members. They started out with 51 in 1946. So, so the community of nations is actually a benefit to everybody because it treats each other as equal. Right now, the state of Hawaii, or the Hawaiian Kingdom, is not being treated as an equal on par with all the other nations because we have been subsumed into the United States. So the benefits that we're looking for are to be able to govern ourselves, to be able to determine our future, and to be able to put our own style of governance into our nation and not be simply a knockoff of the United States. You know, over the years, because of Hawaii's receptivity to people from all over, and particularly early on to the Asians, the Chinese and the Japanese came to the Hawaiian Islands under the Hawaiian Kingdom to live here, to work here and live here and prosper. And then, so we actually have sort of an automatic international community, almost like a United Nations community that sprang up here in the 19th century and has since become a part of the whole fabric of our islands. So you have the Puerto Ricans, you have the Filipinos, you have the Japanese, the Koreans, numerous others that were part of the fabric of our nation and still are. They're part of our society right now. One of the benefits of that is that we have nurtured a melting pot, a mixing pot of this international community. So, for instance, when the United States decided to normalize relationships with China in the 1970s, the consultants and the businessmen that they turned to were the ones that were here in Hawaii, the Chinese Americans or the Chinese Hawaiians that were here in Hawaii, and they were the ones that went and met with the Chinese, with their counterparts, to talk about tourism, to talk about development, talk about architecture and redevelopment and things like that. Many of those consultants came from here because we have a spiritual as well as an ethnic connection with the people, as well as even our language. We knew how to speak Chinese, you know. So, so Hawaii can become a very, or already is, an international trading or hub in the Pacific. So there's the Asia and the Pacific, and our connection with Europe and the United States, and with South America and other countries becomes a very valuable asset to our people here. We communicate quite well with everybody. And then there is the Pacific Islands themselves, which is a whole nother area, Oceania, which again, we are very, very much a part of. So Hawaii can become quite an international hub. It already is an international hub, but it can take its place as a real hub that is not a United States hub, but a Hawaiian Kingdom hub. So what we've talked about so far, actually we understand that the Hawaiian Islands were taken unlawfully, and that we stand on international law to restore our nation, and that this is the message that we have been sending out to the world, as well as to our own people, that Hawaii has the right and has almost an obligation to our forefathers to maintain and to restore our nation. And so this is what we're setting out to do. Now, what we discussed a little bit earlier also about the style of how we do this, how are we going to impact the world? Well, we impact the world by the style of how we approach this problem. And of course, the problem has been, the method has been actually laid out by our Queen, which is basically peaceful, lawful methods, and to trust in doing things right. And if we do things right, that it will eventually come about. So in taking this as well, in the last 40 years since the movement has really begun to self-realize, it's almost as if, you know, the artificial intelligence, when it comes to a point where it's self-realized. 1970s was when we suddenly awoke and said, wait a minute, who are we? And we started to discover that. But we also started to discover that we do have a particular way as a people of relating to one another and relating to others. And that way is really our secret weapon. And that is what we have to utilize. Now, we are pursuing areas of education in the international arena, and we're also pursuing international law. So those are pretty much a given that we have established from a political standpoint that Hawaii is still a sovereign nation in continuity. From a legal standpoint, we still are a nation in continuity. There are some legal challenges that will probably help to establish that from a legal standpoint. But it really boils down to still, how do we think of ourselves as a nation? And this particular awareness is growing more and more exponentially. A year and a half ago, when the Department of the Interior came to Hawaii to hold hearings about creating a federally recognized Indian tribe, there was a tremendous amount of response or reaction against making that particular rule change to create a tribe from the Native Hawaiian people. And this reaction, or this voicing of opposition, told us that we have come a long way in understanding who we are. Not just the fact that we are still a sovereign nation, but that we really want that nation back. And that the only remedy that we will be satisfied with is to receive that nation back. So we do have the legal means, or the legal arguments on our side. We have the political arguments on our side. We have the will of the people on our side. Now, how do we then create from that a movement that will shake this loose. A friend of mine, an international lawyer, very well-known international lawyer, said you can have all the legal arguments, you can win this in the international court, in the world court, but you still have to get a judgment, or you still have to get that enforcement of whatever the judgment is going to be. If one nation as big as the United States refuses, then there's nothing you can do to change it. So it really comes back down to the will of the people. How do the people manage to put enough pressure on a large entity like the United States to have the United States move? So first of all, we have to convince ourselves, the people, that we are engaged in a noble and a just cause, and that this is not simply for this generation, but for generations to come. So this is a game changer, and we have to convince ourselves of this. Secondly, we have to get over the fears and the resistance that we ourselves have built, the lack of confidence, the insecurities and things like that that we have acquired over the years, that have been drummed into our society that Hawaiians can't possibly handle themselves, competently. So we have to get over that. Our young people are beginning, of course, to step up and say, yes, we can do this, because they've not been victimized as much as the older generations. But it's still a major part to get over. So it's building self-confidence, building a vision that where we want to go, and then building the confidence that we can get there, and then simply engaging and starting on it. In other words, proving that our theory of where we want to go is a viable one, is something we can do. And this is something, if we stop and look at the last 40 years of progress, we've made tremendous progress as a nation. We now know we're a nation. We now know we're not the United States. We just need to continue to convince ourselves of that and to act on that level. So we formed an organization called the Coalition of Hawaiian Nationals, and in order to really encourage people to think of themselves as Hawaiian nationals, and to give ourselves a number of projects and things we can do that will help to push the envelope, that will show that the people themselves are preparing themselves to take over our own nation, and are doing so in a very positive light, doing so in a very optimistic light, that we can do this, and that we are determined to do this. Yeah. Well, of course, awareness is the primary thing, that we need to become aware enough so that we start to readjust our thinking and our assumptions and the presumptions about what can be done. And awareness can be the simplest thing. It can just be, for instance, here in Hawaii, one of the biggest habits of how we refer to ourselves is the term, or how we refer to the United States, is the term the mainland, which of course implies that we are a subsection of a larger part, the mainland. So just changing the way we think about ourselves, or just changing the vocabulary, not ever referring to the United States as the mainland, but call it the United States, or the continent, or that country over there, or America, or something other than the mainland, starts to actually reorder our thinking. So now it may sound like a very, it may sound like it's not a very, very great thing to do, but actually it is, because it starts to reorder your mind. One of the other things we're also encouraging people to think about, that when they get up in the morning, the first thing they think about is that they're in the Hawaiian Kingdom. and start to order their mind and remind themselves the whole day long, I'm in the Hawaiian Kingdom, I'm driving my car, I'm in the Hawaiian Kingdom, I'm taking a breath, I'm taking my kids to school or whatever in the Hawaiian Kingdom, just to reorder our thoughts so that we don't see this anymore as the state of Hawaii. We see it as the Hawaiian Kingdom. And that actually begins to reorder our minds. Now, there are more specific things we can do that we would have to be a little bit more cautious about. There are things like, whether or not you drive your car and whether you conform to the United States and the state of Hawaii regulations and rules. But you can decide whether you want to do it or not. But you have to be prepared for a little bit of trouble. So what we're trying to do is to create at least some guidelines to prepare people if they want to take this to a step further, to actually challenge certain aspects of how we live here in Hawaii. Then they have to know what the consequences could be and how to position themselves and things like that. So those are the types of things we're trying to do. The other thing is we are starting on a project for people to be able to identify themselves as Hawaiian nationals. And initially it's simply going to be a declaration. It's just going to say, I'm a Hawaiian national because I believe I am, because I'm from here and all that. So eventually that list will become an actual registry of people who have the ability to be the body politic, the ones who make decisions within the Hawaiian Kingdom or the return of the Hawaiian nation. So there are all of these incremental types of small things we can do that will build up. And then of course there are large events that we can come together on to protest certain things or to call attention or to declare things. For instance, when we resurrect our Independence Day, La Ku'okoa, that is a statement of here we are, and this is our Independence Day, celebrated since 1843, and those types of things, the reminder of our historic landmarks and historic benchmarks. Those types of things are all very valuable to us. So even if we're, say, to create a calendar for Hawaiian nationals that reminds them of all these benchmarks of the Hawaiian Kingdom, the birthdays of different kings and queens and the accomplishments and the trials and tribulations we've gone through, those are all reminders and things we can do. So there are lots and lots of different ways we can build the awareness and the consciousness of our nation. One of the greatest challenges we have, of course, is finances. What we're looking for right now is just a lot of people to be aware of our situation, but also to be willing to contribute toward the re-education of our people and the enactment of these acts of resistance, so to speak, by helping us to educate people. For instance, we have a very large tourist industry here. Over 8 million tourists come through Hawaii every year. We would love to educate them that they're in the Hawaiian Kingdom. And so we could use some funds to produce materials to be able to put these friendly reminders into the hands of all these tourists who come here, and then where they can go to get more information and things like that, and how they can support us. So the things that the people who are not living in Hawaii can do is to become aware and to help spread the word and to help to assist us in providing more information.